It begins with a flower, a soft, pale bloom swaying under the Mesopotamian sun, its petals trembling in the wind like the eyelids of a dreamer. Before we dive in, let me know down in the comments below where you are joining in from. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. 5,000 years ago, the Sumerians called it Hulgil, the plant of joy. In clay tablets dug from the soil of Nippur, they described the milky sap that brought sleep to the restless and silence to the wounded. The story of opium begins not with war or greed, but with wonder, a discovery that humanity could harvest both mercy and oblivion from a single stem. As civilization spread along the fertile rivers of the Near East, the poppy followed. The Egyptians mixed its resin into draughts of mandrake and wine, prescribing it to the dying and the despairing. In Thebes, jars marked with the poppy emblem were placed beside the dead, tokens of comfort for journeys beyond breath. Across the Aegean, the Minoans of Crete carved their goddess figurines with crowns of poppy pods, symbols of sleep and rebirth. The Greek world inherited this quiet flower and gave it philosophy. Theophrastus, student of Aristotle, catalogued its essence. Hippocrates praised its powers, yet warned of excess. To the ancients, opium was never evil. It was divine and dangerous, a whisper from the gods that promised peace at a price. Soldiers carried it in their satchels to numb pain and fear before battle. Mothers kept it to ease the agony of childbirth. It blurred the line between life and death long before anyone spoke of addiction. And yet, even in these earliest uses, a paradox took root. Every culture that touched the poppy saw both salvation and shadow. The Assyrians used it to lull prisoners into submission. Roman physicians distilled it into laudanum, a draught strong enough to calm emperors and executioners alike. In the Roman camps of Gaul, wounded soldiers were given poppy wine to dull their screams. The flower that healed also erased. It softened memory and dulled conscience. Centuries passed. The world changed, but the poppy endured, spreading eastward along the arteries of trade. Caravans carried its dried latex in clay jars across Persia, India, and Central Asia. By the time Alexander's armies marched toward the Indus, the poppy had already taken root there, its seeds mingling with the soil of empires yet unborn. By the first millennium, opium was no longer merely a medicine. It was a traveler, a companion of merchants, mystics, and conquerors. The Silk Road became its river. Carried in caravans of camels and dreams, it passed through Persia and the Hindu Kush, from the bazaars of Samarkand to the ports of India. Everywhere it went, it adapted shifting form, changing purpose, wearing the language of its new home. In Persia, physicians under the Abbasid Caliphate refined it into tinctures of extraordinary potency. Avicenna ibn Sina, the father of early medicine, recorded its properties with precision in his canon of medicine, calling it both remedy and poison. To him, opium could be the sleep of mercy, but taken too often, it was a thief of breath. In India, the Mughal emperors would later cultivate poppy fields like gold. What began as a small medicinal herb under ancient Vedic apothecaries grew into vast plains of pale blossoms shimmering in dawn light, their sap collected drop by patient hands. The Mughal court physicians used it to soothe royal ailments, but also as a pleasure of the elite. The line between treatment and indulgence blurred, as it always did. In China, it arrived quietly, through the ships of Arab traders and the dusty trails of Buddhist monks. At first, it was accepted as a rare curiosity, an ingredient in medicine, a friend of philosophers. When the Tang dynasty's physicians prescribed it, they called it afuyun, the Arabic word softened by Chinese tongues. By the Song era, opium was mixed into teas and tonics, a warmth for cold nights. No one imagined the devastation it would later bring. Across civilizations, opium had become a paradox, made flesh, or rather, made flower. It was both sacred and profane, traded by monks and smugglers alike. It soothed emperors and soldiers, lovers and beggars. Its journey mirrored humanity's own, always searching for relief, always risking ruin. By the 16th century, as European sails began to slice across distant oceans, the world's geography of trade was rewritten. The Portuguese brought opium from Goa to Canton. The Dutch followed, lacing their global mercantile empires with the same intoxicating thread. What had once moved by camel now moved by cannon. The gentle flower of the Sumerians had become a weapon of commerce, and with commerce came consumption. By the early 18th century, China's fascination with opium deepened. No longer confined to apothecaries, it found its way into taverns, tea houses, and palaces. Mixed with tobacco, it transformed into smoke thick, sweet, and seductive. The poppy was no longer drunk or swallowed. It was inhaled, breathed into the very lungs of civilization. Opium dens glowed in the dim alleys of Canton and Shanghai. The smoke curled upward, delicate as silk, carrying both rapture and ruin. Artists painted under its spell. Scholars dreamed of immortality. Lovers floated in its haze. Yet behind the beauty was a slow decay, one that even the Qing emperors could not ignore. The imperial court began to see its empire dissolve, not in battle, but in a cloud. From 1729 onward, edicts attempted to ban or restrict the trade. But prohibitions were futile. The hunger for escape, for that golden sleep, was stronger than law. And then came Britain. The British East India Company, seeing both opportunity and leverage, transformed opium from a curiosity into a commodity, perhaps the most profitable weapon of its time. In Bengal, the company seized control of vast farmlands, compelling peasants to grow poppy under harsh contracts. The raw sap was processed into dense black cakes and shipped to Canton by the ton. It was not merely trade, it was strategy. The British had long thirsted for Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain, yet the Qing Empire demanded silver in payment. Britain's coffers began to drain. The solution, whispered in London's smoky parlours, was simple: sell addiction in return. Opium became the counterweight of empire. By the early 1800s, Britain's ships were offloading thousands of chests of Bengal opium each year into Chinese harbours. A tide of smoke rose from every coastal city. Silver flowed out of China and into British vaults. The economy inverted, the world tilted. In the villages of Guangdong, families pawned their tools and heirlooms for one more pipe. Soldiers of the Qing army, once proud, disciplined men, were seen trembling in their barracks. Officials smoked in secret while preaching morality in public. The emperor's own court was split between reform and denial. One voice rose above the rest: Lin Zexu, the imperial commissioner of Canton. In 1839, he wrote to Queen Victoria, pleading for conscience, "We have heard that in your own land, opium is forbidden. Why then do you allow it to be sold here? If you will not do good to others, at least do not bring harm upon them." His words were ignored. That same year, he ordered the seizure and destruction of over 20,000 chests of opium, an act of moral defiance that would ignite war. As the smoke cleared from Canton's harbour, Britain's response came not as letters, but as gunfire. The Opium Wars had begun a conflict, not for land, but for addiction itself. The ships arrived like shadows on the tide steel and smoke against the pale sky of the South China Sea. Britain called them merchant escorts. In truth, they were war machines, bristling with cannons, bearing the flag of a kingdom that sold sleep and death in equal measure. The year was 1839, and China stood at a crossroads of pride and ruin. The Qing dynasty, one of the oldest and most magnificent empires on earth, found itself strangled not by armies, but by appetite. The poppy's white tears its resin, once traded as medicine, had become an instrument of imperial control. When Commissioner Lin Zexu destroyed the chests of opium at Human, he believed he was defending civilization itself. To him, It was not merely contraband, it was corruption embodied, a poison that bled China's soul. Yet, across the ocean, British merchants demanded retribution. They claimed their property had been unjustly seized. The empire of conscience met the empire of commerce, and the cannons spoke the language of profit. The First Opium War began. It was not a war of equals. The British Navy, armed with ironclads and industrial precision, met a Qing fleet still reliant on wooden junks and ancient discipline. Battles at the Pearl River, Zhoushan, and the Yangtze Delta unfolded like grim theatre-elegant cities burning under the glare of modern artillery. Chinese troops, brave but ill-equipped, fell before the thunder of guns they could not match. By 1842, the Treaty of Nanking was signed. Its terms were brutal and irreversible. China ceded Hong Kong to Britain, opened 5 ports to foreign trade, and paid millions in silver as indemnity. Yet the true loss was not territory, it was dignity. An ancient civilization, proud and self-contained, was forced into the machinery of global capitalism by the very substance it had once tolerated. The flower that had soothed pain for millennia had now reshaped geopolitics. But the story did not end there. Greed rarely rests. Even after the First War, British merchants, now joined by American smugglers and Indian financiers, expanded the opium trade tenfold. By the 1850s, over 70,000 chests were pouring into China annually. Entire provinces withered under its influence. The countryside emptied into addiction, the treasury drained again. Silver, once the lifeblood of the Chinese economy, fled overseas. When the Qing court tried once more to resist, the response was the Second Opium War, 1856 to 1860, a campaign clothed in rhetoric about free trade and diplomatic rights. In reality, it was another act of coercion at the barrel of a gun. The Anglo-French alliance stormed into China. Canton fell, then Tianjin. Finally, Beijing itself. The invaders marched into the summer palace, the Yuanmingyuan, a wonder of gardens, art, and philosophy built over centuries. They looted what they could, and when there was nothing left to steal, they set it ablaze. The smoke of that palace mingled with the same opium smoke that had begun the conflict, the smoke of humiliation, curling toward heaven. China signed another treaty, the Treaty of Tientsin, one that legalized the very trade that had ruined it. Opium was no longer contraband, it was commerce protected by international law. The poppy had conquered an empire without ever lifting a sword. For the Western powers, victory tasted sweet and profitable. For China, it was an open wound that would fester for generations. Historians later called the 19th century China's century of humiliation. But to understand the depth of that phrase, one must see beyond the treaties and silver to the homes, the faces, the silence. Opium became not just an economic plague, but a cultural one. In the streets of Guangzhou and Shanghai, one could walk through entire neighborhoods, veiled in smoke. Men who once labored on docks or tilled rice fields now lay in rows on bamboo mats, their pipes resting on porcelain pillows. The empire's scholars, once masters of Confucian wisdom, grew gaunt and pale, their ink-stained fingers trembling. Writers of the time spoke of the sleeping nation. Pain was not erased, it was numbed. Yet, even in despair, humanity searched for meaning. Some Chinese physicians tried to wean patients through herbal antidotes and moral reform. Reformers like Kang Yue and Li Hongzhang warned that China's survival depended on breaking the poppy's spell. But by then, the addiction had seeped into everything: the body, the bureaucracy, the bloodstream of the nation itself. Meanwhile, far beyond Asia, the flower found new soil. In the 19th century West, opium took new forms. The British chemist Friedrich Serturner isolated morphine, naming it after Morpheus, the god of dreams. Pharmacists mixed laudanum opium, dissolved in alcohol, and sold it freely to soothe headaches, heartbreaks, and hysteria. In Victorian England, bottles of laudanum sat beside Bible verses on nightstands. Writers like Thomas de Quincey and Coleridge confessed their devotion to its dreams. Painters drifted into its velvet fog. The very societies that condemned China for its weakness now worship the same poppy in polished glass. By the dawn of the 20th century, opium's descendants, morphine and later heroin, would march into new wars, into hospitals, and into hearts seeking solace from modernity's noise. The story was no longer confined to Asia or empire. It had become universal, a mirror held to the human desire for escape. Today, the poppy still blooms. Its petals tremble in the winds of Afghanistan, Turkey, and Southeast Asia, the same winds that once carried it from Sumer to Thebes, from Canton to London. Its sap still flows, though the names have changed. Morphine, heroin, oxycodone. The chemistry evolved, but the longing remained. From ancient temples to hospital wards, from battlefield tents to suburban bedrooms, humanity has always returned to this flower, to chase relief, to silence pain, to forget time. Perhaps the true history of opium is not about war or empire, but about the human condition itself, our endless search for peace in a restless world. Every age has found its way back to the poppy, drawn by that fragile promise that somewhere between waking and sleep lies mercy. But mercy, like smoke, never lingers long. The flower closes at dusk, the dream fades, and as it has for 5,000 years, the world awakens haunted by the scent of something beautiful and the cost of forgetting. If you enjoyed watching this video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.